There is a strange paradox unfolding across the modern world. Never before in human history have human beings been so connected. We can reach almost anyone at almost any time from almost anywhere on Earth. And yet, millions of people feel profoundly alone. Not only during a difficult season, chronically, persistently, quietly. A kind of loneliness that follows a person through crowded cities, through busy offices, through family gatherings, and sometimes, most painfully, through the middle of an intimate relationship. Think about that for a moment. How is it possible to be surrounded by people and still feel alone? How is it possible to have hundreds of contacts, thousands of followers, a phone that never stops lighting up, and still feel a quiet, persistent sense of disconnection underneath all of it? Perhaps loneliness is not what we think it is. Perhaps it has very little to do with other people at all. And perhaps the answer is not more connection. To understand why, we need to sit with one of the oldest questions a human mind has ever asked itself. What happens exactly when you are left alone with nothing but yourself? I want you to try a thought experiment. Imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up in a comfortable room. There is food, water, a bed, everything you need. But for the next 24 hours, you are completely alone. No phone, no internet, no music, no television, no books, no conversation, no distraction of any kind. Just you and whatever happens to be moving through your own mind. How does that feel? Even just to imagine. Most people grow uncomfortable simply picturing this. Not because the room itself is dangerous. Not because anything threatens them physically. But because something else begins to surface the moment the imagining starts. Something most of us spend an enormous amount of energy avoiding without ever quite admitting it. Ourselves. Here's a strange but well-documented truth. Many people can move through an entire day talking, working, scrolling, watching, consuming, without spending even 10 unguarded minutes alone with their own thoughts. And that should make us curious. Human beings have crossed oceans, built civilizations, split the atom, created machines that can hold a conversation. And yet, many of us struggle. We struggle to sit quietly in a single room with nothing but our own company for even a short while. Why does silence feel uncomfortable? Why does stillness so often feel threatening? Why does loneliness seem to arrive at the exact moment distraction disappears? The answer may be very different from what most of us expect. But perhaps this becomes easier to understand through a story. Because loneliness does not always appear where we expect it to. Sometimes it appears in the people who seem to have everything. Consider a man we'll call Daniel. Daniel is 43 years old, successful, respected, living in New York City. The kind of life many people spend decades trying to build. A beautiful apartment, a loving family, a successful career, a calendar filled weeks in advance. From the outside, Daniel appears to have won. And yet, there is something he never talks about, something most people never talk about. A feeling that visits him late at night, when the noise of life finally settles. Every morning, Daniel wakes with purpose. Meetings, projects, deadlines, people relying on him. His schedule is full. His phone rarely stops buzzing. There is always another task, another conversation, another responsibility waiting for him. And because of that, there is very little room for silence, very little room for stillness, very little room for himself. But one evening, something changes. Daniel returns home later than usual. The city outside is unusually quiet. His wife and children are already asleep. For the first time all day, nothing is demanding his attention. No emails, no meetings, no conversations, no notifications. He walks toward the large window overlooking Manhattan. Thousands of lights stretch across the darkness. Millions of people, millions of lives, millions of stories unfolding at the same time. And yet, standing there alone, Daniel feels something he cannot explain. A strange emptiness, a quiet discomfort, a feeling that has been following him for years, but only reveals itself when everything else becomes quiet. At first, he tries to ignore it. Most people do. He checks his phone. Nothing important. He opens an app, scrolls for a moment, then closes it. The feeling remains. He walks to the kitchen, gets a glass of water, looks out the window again. Still there, waiting, patiently. And for the first time, instead of distracting himself, he asks a question. Why? Why do I feel lonely right now? Nothing is wrong. My family is here. My career is thriving. My life is objectively good. So where is this feeling coming from? And this is where things become interesting. Because according to Indian psychology, Daniel is about to discover something most people never realize. The feeling he calls loneliness may not actually be loneliness at all. The feeling Daniel experienced that night is something most people immediately label as loneliness. But according to the Indian mystic Osho, that label may be completely wrong. And if it is wrong, then our entire approach to solving loneliness may also be wrong. Because Osho made a distinction that is rarely discussed in modern psychology. He said there are two very different experiences that most people confuse as one: loneliness and solitude. At first glance, they appear identical. In both cases, you are alone. There is no conversation, no company, no one sitting beside you. Externally, the situation looks exactly the same. But internally, they are worlds apart. Loneliness is the feeling that something is missing. Solitude is the realization that nothing is missing. Loneliness feels empty. Solitude feels full. Loneliness says, I need someone. Solitude, I am enough. Loneliness searches. Solitude rests. Loneliness is dependence. Solitude is freedom. And this distinction changes everything. Because it suggests something most people have never considered. Perhaps the problem is not being alone. Perhaps the problem is our relationship to being alone. Think about that carefully. Most people spend their entire lives trying to escape aloneness. They seek relationships, communities, entertainment, constant stimulation. Not because these things are inherently bad, but because they hope these things will remove an uncomfortable feeling within themselves. And for a while, they seem to work. A new relationship appears. The loneliness disappears. A screen lights up. The loneliness disappears, at least temporarily. But eventually, the relationship becomes familiar. The party ends. The screen goes dark. And the feeling returns. Why? Because the feeling was never created by the absence of other people. It was created by the absence of a relationship with oneself. And this is the insight Osho kept returning to. He said that most people are never truly alone, even when sitting by themselves, because their minds remain crowded. Crowded with memories, crowded with desires, crowded with regrets, crowded with imagined futures, crowded with unfinished conversations. The room may be empty, but the mind is not. In fact, many people fear solitude for exactly this reason. The moment external noise disappears, internal noise becomes impossible to ignore. And so we keep ourselves occupied. We scroll, we watch, we listen, we consume. Not because we enjoy it, but because silence begins revealing things we would rather not see. But Osho suggested something radical. What if loneliness is not an enemy? What if it is an invitation? An invitation to discover a part of yourself that constant distraction has hidden. Because beyond loneliness, beyond the discomfort, beyond the endless search for someone or something to complete us, there exists another state entirely, a state Osho called solitude, not loneliness. Not isolation, not withdrawal, but a simple enjoyment of one's own presence, a feeling of being at home within oneself. And once a person discovers that state, their relationships change completely, because they are no longer seeking another person to fill an emptiness. They are sharing a fullness. And that is a very different kind of connection. But this raises an even deeper question. If solitude is our natural state, then why does loneliness arise in the first place? What is happening inside the mind that transforms simple aloneness into suffering? To answer that question, we need to go deeper, far deeper, into the nature of thought itself. And few people investigated that mystery more relentlessly than Jiddu Krishnamurti. So, if solitude is natural, where does loneliness come from? Why do so many people experience suffering the moment they are left alone? To answer that question, we need to look deeper than relationships, deeper than social circumstances, deeper even than loneliness itself. We need to examine the machinery of thought. And few people investigated that machinery more